Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Laurie Nadel, and she's here to share with us reframing COVID and getting support from other Longhaulers. Now, many of you remember Laurie. She's been on the show before. She's a psychologist, journalist, and best-selling author of The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes. And she specializes in helping people recover from trauma. In Long Beach, New York, she runs a support group at City Hall for people who are traumatized by losing their homes in Hurricane Sandy. During 2003 and 2005, she directed a program for teenagers whose fathers were killed in 9/11, and she currently leads 2 online support groups for Longhaulers of COVID. So let's welcome to the show, Laurie Nadel.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for having me as your guest.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to have another discussion. I mean, I know last time we were talking about your fabulous book that you have, The 5 Gifts. So it's so nice that we get to do this again. And my goodness, it seems like, what's on the top of everybody's mind is COVID.
Absolutely. Well, the pandemic has made, for some people, catastrophic. It's a global catastrophe, really. And it affects all areas of our lives. It affects our health, our mental health, and our economic health. So this is a big one that we're living through.
So, I mean, and I know there's just so much that everyone has. Either we know someone that's had COVID or someone that's passed, and it's just a really tough time. How can we reframe COVID as a sacred illness?
Well, I have a couple of groups that I'm working with online. One is for people who have long-haul COVID, and one of them is available to anybody who has COVID or is struggling with living with COVID symptoms. And you can find out about that at pulmonarywellness.org, which is a not-for-profit pulmonary wellness foundation. We offer Sunday night open sessions, and I also have a closed group for firefighters and first responders who have long COVID. And the important thing, because everybody who's sick for a long period of time starts to struggle with, really very serious questions like, who am I if I can't work anymore? Who am I if I can no longer walk or kayak? Or who am I if I can barely stand up and make dinner? We ask ourselves, what's our future going to be like? We don't have the future that we thought we were going to have. So, the long-term version of COVID brings up some very haunting questions for people. And what we offer in both groups is an opportunity to reframe COVID, which is a severe illness for millions and millions of people, to what we call a sacred illness. And I use a quote by therapist Dina Metzger, who wrote very movingly about her own battles with cancer and other diseases. Her quote is that a sacred illness is one that educates us and alters us from the inside out. It provides experiences and therefore knowledge that we could not possibly achieve in any other way. And it aligns us with a life path that is ultimately of benefit to ourselves and those around us. And so when we examine our lives and we feel very, the definition of something traumatic is we feel hopeless and we feel helpless. We feel horrified and helpless at the same time. And COVID hits people very quickly. It's more of like being hit by a truck or being in an accident than like a progressive illness of some kind. So, people spend a lot of time just coping with the shock of the suddenness and the sudden loss to health and the way it affects us physically. And if we don't recover within, say, a month to 2 months, and the symptoms persist or new symptoms show up, then we have a whole different set of circumstances psychologically to deal with, which is, it looks like I'm not getting better right away. How am I going to live my life fully with the limitations that I have because of this illness? And how can I stay positive? And what do I have to offer other people? And interestingly enough, we find that when we create a community of empathy, that even people who have been sick for months, who are struggling with isolation, who are bedridden, who've lost the normal flow of whatever social contacts or rhythm that they had, may or may not have family, that when we get together as a community and as a group, people have offered complete acceptance and overwhelming support and caring for what the other person is going through. And I think it's through that safety net of empathy that we can come to appreciate that even a horrifying illness like COVID can awaken us spiritually and can open up our hearts with compassion to each other so that it becomes a sacred illness and it can become a gift, although it's not a gift that I would wish on anybody, mind you. But if you do happen to be living with a long-term chronic illness, it's the kind of gift that makes a big difference in feeling good about yourself, even when you're not feeling physically well.
So, what had you just interested in starting these online groups and working with firefighters?
Well, as we spoke about last time, I have a book, The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes. Very proud that my writing mentor, Dan Rather, wrote the foreword to the book, which came out a couple of years ago. And the book really looks at the culture of first responders as people who are able to face, sudden, violent, harsh, life and death events on a daily basis. And yet they have a mindset of resilience and optimism and courage that we can model and we can learn from them when times get tough, like now. And we do tend now to have more respect for essential workers and healthcare workers and first responders, which I think is important. But I had started working with first responders after September 11th and continue to work with first responders who are still affected by September 11th, even though we're coming on 20 years. And it's really important for even people who handle, life and death events on a daily basis, dealing with a huge and sudden catastrophic event, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's an environmental disaster, it still can cause anybody, even a courageous professional, to feel overwhelmed and to feel to have flashbacks and to feel unsettled, off and on for a long period of time. So that's been my path since I started my second career in 1991. My first career was in journalism, and it was because of that first career I was guided into a second career where I can help people who are dealing with the kinds of events that we think of as breaking news.
Well, I'm grateful that you're in your second career because it's helping so many people. I mean, your book, The 5 Gifts, is such a profound book. I felt like it was very helpful. I know a lot of people I've talked about feel the same way. Some of the things I was surprised about is, when they talk about the people who have COVID and recover, that they really are going through symptoms for a long period of time. And I was surprised by how many people they think have this.
That's right. Well, we don't know. I mean, I've read, I think somebody at a CDC webinar said it could be anywhere from 10% to 80%, meaning they have no idea. But a neurologist recently estimated that it could be, between 20, 25% and maybe, 33%. So it could be as many as a quarter to 1/3 of people who get COVID have some kind of long haul or long COVID that persists, months and sometimes even, more than a year later. And it causes a dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system. So, which means it can affect your heart. Your heartbeat can suddenly get very, very fast. in a way that's medically unsafe, just if you change position, if you go from sitting to standing. There's a technical term, medical term for that, but we call it POTS. It has to do with the postural position changing, and your nervous system isn't regulating that properly. It affects digestion. It causes brain fog, and fatigue are probably the main pervasive symptoms that can last a very long time. So this is, again, it's a very serious illness that is affecting more people on a long-term basis than we're really aware of.
Are you noticing that people who have suffered with COVID and maybe now they're experiencing some type of disability, that they're having also like PTSD or other forms of anxiety?
The anxiety level is very high because there's no way to be able to plan for a future. If you go from day to day and you don't know if you're going to be able to sit up, or you don't know if you're going to be able to take a walk, or you don't know, if you're going to be able to walk 4 minutes, in a basic exercise routine for rehabilitation, things become very, I don't even say the word uncertain. They're very unpredictable. And so, it's very hard for people to envision, based on where I am today, 6 months from now, this is where I think I'm going to be, because there's an unpredictable nature to COVID. It's not stable, and we don't know, is it going to move into different areas of the body? Is it going to be progressive? Is it going to get better? Most people do get better. But, there could be as many as a third, I think, is the neurologist's number of people who continue to suffer with these long COVID symptoms, even when they test negative after the first phase, the acute phase of COVID has passed.
It's unreal how COVID can really ravage a body and continue to do that, even though time has passed and people are thinking, okay, well, I'm not testing positive. I got to be okay by now.
Exactly. And also very often doctors they're overwhelmed. They're overworked. They may or may not have, the latest information coming in. Doctors are doing a tremendous amount to learn quickly, and they're learning on the job. They didn't know what to do at the beginning. They now have treatments that are reliable and available to people. They're definitely disturbed when somebody dies on the shift. And they're working very hard to try to get the newest treatments available for their patients, whether they're hospitalized or whether they're office patients. But at the same time, they don't have the information for somebody who comes in months later and says, I'm having rapid heartbeat, which I never had before. My blood pressure is going crazy. I can't think straight. I have brain fog. I'm fatigued all the time. I can barely move. They list all these symptoms. Say, well, I had COVID. As you know, I had COVID 2 or 3 months ago, and the doctor will run some tests, but they won't find anything necessarily, because the testing that you need to find long COVID is only just now being developed by a group of doctors. I think they're in California, and they have a way of testing for inflammatory markers in your blood. It's not a standard blood test, but it will find the key places where they can draw a link between the inflammatory markers, or what they call the interleukins in the blood, and the COVID response, the long-term COVID symptoms. So, it's taking a lot of research. So many people around the world, and it's really inspiring. There's so many dedicated professionals who are just really living with the sense of purpose of, wanting to eradicate this disease so that we can all lead healthier lives. And I'd just like to take a moment and to say thank you, as we say thank you to our first responders and our healthcare workers. We are much further along than we were a year ago. We have the great blessing of vaccines and more vaccines coming, along the way. and we have hygiene, and we have clean water, and we have information. So I think we have what we need. People just need to pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting. We've got these, just heroic first responders and medical workers that are really putting their lives on the line every single day to do the best they can. And I'm with you. A big thanks goes to them for everything that they're doing and continue to do, because it really is a 24/7 job for them. There is no break.
That's right. Right. They don't have a break. They live with that sense of commitment. Very often they're on call. Friends of mine who were in the medical field, are working more shifts. They have to cover for other workers, employees, or medical staff who are out sick with COVID or out sick, caring for somebody with COVID. It's put a huge strain on our health and hospital system. And I think we also need to be aware of that and sensitive to that. We have incredible medical availability here, and as I said, in information and access to public health information. But we are kind of at a breaking point when you look at the stories, the numbers about the hospitals being flooded again with influxes of severe COVID patients. And it's hard on everybody who's working in that environment. It's like working in a war zone, and it does take a toll on everybody, on the professionals who are working there, and the admin people, and patients and families as well. This is a very psychologically very tough to be living and enduring during this pandemic that's gone on for a year now.
Yeah. Why do you feel that COVID is considered a disaster of uncertainty?
If you think back, it's a really great question. And actually, one of my teachers came up with that phrase, Dr. George Everly at the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. And he's done a lot of work with first responders and with trauma disaster survivors around the world. And, he's pointed out that when you think about a disaster, you think about a hurricane, for example, or you think about September 11th, two big ones that come to mind are the most recent, Capitol insurgency, which you could say was a intentional act of violence. Those events have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then you have, the aftermath, the complicated aftermath of recovery from that event. So, but the event itself was contained, there's chronology to it. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So there's an end to the event in time that you can say, on such and such a date, or at such and such a time, or after 4 hours, or after, 3 hours, or after 22 seconds, or whatever it was, this event was over, and we had to deal with the horror of the rest of it. But with COVID, we don't know exactly when it started. There are people who claim that they had COVID symptoms as early as December 2019, which was before COVID was officially announced in Wuhan, China. I think in Wuhan it was first surfaced at the end of December, but people were going back and forth between different countries, and there are people I know who have reported that they had COVID symptoms as early as December 2019. So it doesn't have it has a formal entry date that we know of, but it doesn't really have a beginning, a middle, and we really can't predict the end. We really don't know when it's going to end. We have encouraging signs, but we also have a lot of different variant strains, and we don't really know. Certainly we have a lot of, this is all new, so we don't have a lot of documentation or data to be able to predict, what's going to happen 5 months from now, or 7 months from now, or a year from now. We just have to keep working at it and hope that we can kind of outnumber it at some point with herd immunity.
Yeah, I mean, I even heard, I think it was yesterday, the day before, they were talking about how, it may be something where we are actually looking to get vaccinated on a yearly basis for maybe the next 5 years with all these variants. And so you look at this, and this is something that's going to be with us long term. It's not an overnight thing.
That's right. That's also what makes it a disaster of uncertainty. And I apologize for my rather long-winded answer, but we live in this feeling of not knowing, when it's going to end, and that's what makes it a disaster of uncertainty. All disasters to a certain degree are disasters of uncertainty because they take away our sense of safety, and what we thought we could count on suddenly is gone. You got up, you thought you were going to have a normal day, and then, something completely, horrendous happened that you survived, or someone who was directly affected, or you bore witness to it, on your screen, but you're still involved, we're still engaged with it. So, the effect of that, it still has an impact on you. And we're living with this all the time. We're living with this, lack of timeline. I guess I would say, it's a disaster without a clear timeline. And so we're not used to that. We're used to things being more predictable. So it leaves a kind of very unsettled feeling among most people.
So let's talk about isolation for a minute. How is this considered like a stress amplifier, especially during this time?
Isolation, Marianne, is if you think about prisons or wartime, when they want to punish somebody for being insubordinate, they throw them in solitary. And, there's a difference between spending time alone, and there's a difference between being lonely, and there's a difference between being introverted, and there's a difference between being isolated. And you can be introverted and still feel isolated by this prolonged kind of, quarantine type of situation. So Carl Jung said that some people, if he looked at us, some of us would put our energy out to the world of people, activities, and things, because that's what feels best to us. And some people will pull their energy or draw their attention inward to the world of concepts and ideas. And those people are called introverts. And that doesn't mean that introverts never put their energy out to people or places or things, but it does mean that in order to regroup or in order to overcome stress, somebody who prefers introversion will spend time alone or with one or two friends, and won't want to engage with a lot of people, because that's how you release stress. And that's how you gather, your energy again, is by going into solitude. But if you are forced to stay in solitude for a long period of time, and there's a fear component that, if you break your solitude and you start hanging out with people, you could come down with this horrible illness. And so you're basically sacrificing your need for social contact, which is a human need, with your sense of survival, which is, the need not to be exposed to this pathogen. And it can create extreme conflict in people because we crave social interaction. We want to sit down with another person. We want to have a cup of coffee. We want to take a walk. We want to go into a store and not feel that, maybe we've put our lives at risk by doing one of these things that used to be normal activities. And so the isolation adds like a huge stress layer to something that, already is troubling in the extreme, which is, COVID, and what is the risk of COVID, and what would I be risking if I were to possibly, God forbid, catch COVID? How would it affect my life? So there are a lot of uncertainties, and it's kind of feels sometimes like the edges of reality have become very jagged.
Yeah. And but those are really, those are questions I think everyone's asking themselves right now, because this is a real thing. Just going out and buying groceries, we could end up, contracting COVID, and we could do all the right things. And I've had friends that have had this happen, and so with this everyday fear that's kind of building up, how do people get to a place where they can kind of release this fear and stress, and I don't know if we'll ever be okay with it, but get to a place where at least they're feeling a little bit more comfortable with everything they can do?
The key question that you're asking, which I think is so profound, is how can we find a place of safety when the world around us isn't safe or isn't as safe as it was before these conditions started. And so there are, I call them emotional first aid tools, which I do explain in the 5 gifts. But we also now have some demonstration videos that are available at the Pulmonary Wellness Foundation website, which is pulmonarywellness, all one word, .org. And you just click on the COVID, and I think we have, there's a box for talks and I think videos. And a lot of the tools that we've been sharing in the support group will be available for anybody to look at on that website. So there are things that I can show you how to do that will take the edge off. Things like breathing in a color that's soothing and exhaling so that you're releasing any tension or stress by breathing out a different color, or crossing your arms over your heart and just gently tapping on your lungs near your shoulders and over your heart. That's called butterfly hugs, and it's an acupressure technique. And these techniques work very quickly to kind of slow down your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, take the edge off, the physiology of the stress response, because we're all living in a heightened state of stress. And unfortunately, what we know is that stress causes inflammation, and inflammation causes COVID relapses. So people who have COVID have to be very, very careful about managing stress. And because our immune systems are also dealing with so much right now, it's very, very important to kind of try to alleviate stress by finding a couple of techniques that work for you very quickly so that the stress levels don't escalate, because then that can affect all kinds of areas of our lives, including our health. So stress management, I think, is the absolute key to trying to get through this unstable period without feeling really ungrounded.
And I was so surprised hearing that there was this correlation between COVID and having COVID flare-ups and inflammation. I was like, whoa. I think most people don't even realize that that's something they really need to pay attention to.
No, I think we're just starting to get the word out. This is Dr. Greenspan at the Pulmonary Wellness Foundation had made this connection a few months ago based on the work that he's been doing with long-haul COVID patients now for over a year. And, and I think that there's some research now that's starting to show the relationship between inflammation and COVID flare-ups. But also in general, an inflammation response causes chronic pain conditions. Anything with an itis can be triggered by stress, arthritis, bronchitis. I mean, any itis has a stress-related trigger. And so, managing stress is really, really important. And it's just as important as water and nutrition and keeping our health, stable as much as possible. Staying calm is very, very important, and it's difficult to do because things around us are anything but calm.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's just, tensions are high. We're probably drinking way too much coffee.
Right.
And, just everyday life is happening. And even though people are working from home, it seems like everyone's just more stressed.
Yes. Well, again, it's been going on for a year. People, millions of people are struggling financially and economically. There are so many people whose businesses shut down or whose work, they got fired from work, or the place they were working for, the company shut down. It was very it was a very tough year, even though the stock market, has been doing very well. But in the real people economy, it's very scary out there. Economy is a lot of millions of jobless people. I think as many jobless people as there are several. If you had 4 countries the size of Holland and everybody was unemployed, or a country the size of Argentina that has 40 million people, and everybody in Argentina plus 2 countries the size of Holland were unemployed. That's kind of what we're looking at. I mean, these are like this is a giant population of people who haven't been able to work. And it's, if we think about it in those terms, it really is also an economic disaster that's going to need a lot of work to reboot. I mean, we will reboot, but it's really complicated by the pandemic and the different ways that the pandemic has really damaged our way of life.
Yeah, you see people really doing the best they can to reinvent themselves in some way. And I think a lot of times people just don't even know where to start.
That it's very difficult to start a behavior modification program when you're going through we're going through extreme stress or we're grieving. This is really not the time to say that you're going to lose 20 pounds or start going to the gym or stop smoking. This is really a time to modify all of your habits as much as possible. And if you're not used to exercising, just do a little bit and go gently. If you're going to change your diet, do it gently. And I think that, the word gentleness is really something that we have to learn in terms of, how to get through it as best we can every day by being gentler with ourselves and understanding that, these are not easy times. And whatever we used to do to cope when we weren't feeling well, we might also need to add, a period of like 5 minutes of quiet time every day and make that a habit, like brushing your teeth. And whether that's 5 minutes of quiet time that you do some kind of meditation or prayer or listen to music or light a candle and stare at the flame or just do something to kind of focus your mind on something other than all the heavy stuff that you have to deal with in your life, it will begin to promote a kind of a sense of stability and safety that's internal, that's going to help you to make better survival decisions, because we're all making survival decisions every day, and that gets it wears on the body, and it wears on the mind, and it chews up a lot of hormones and stress hormones and energy. So we need that 5 minutes of calm. And I really urge everybody to try to find a little window of 5 minutes and just do something that helps you to feel calm for those 5 minutes a day. And I think that will really help people to feel, well, I might not have any locus of control for what's going on outside or what's happening with my job or, what's happening with the government or what's happening with COVID, but I can control what I do for these 5 minutes a day. And I can focus on finding a sense of inner peace or well-being. And just thinking about that for 5 minutes every day, that's my locus of control. And that will help you to feel calmer when you have to make some very difficult decisions under pressure.
Yes, I agree with you on that. I think there's just so much that people are being bombarded with. And I understand you also, share with people, just what happens when we don't heal, or we have an injury or illness and we've got cycles that we're going through. What are those cycles?
Well, it's this is something that I've been aware of for a long time. When we don't heal within a couple of months, say you have an athletic injury or you have an illness, and you don't start to recover within a couple of months, you experience what I call 3 cycles, or I call them the 3 elephants. And the 3 elephants are 3 cycles of loss that don't really your doctor won't tell you about them. They're not usually addressed. But the first one is a loss of control, where you realize that you no longer have control over your physical body in the way that you used to. So maybe you can't walk. Maybe you can only sit up in bed for a few minutes at a time. Maybe there are certain things that you used to do. Breathing, for example, without a nebulizer or without oxygen. Maybe there are things you used to be able to do with your hands, but now you can't because you have arthritis, in the joints. So these kinds of long, kind of chronic conditions can make us feel that we've lost control over our biology, over our body and basic functionality. The second loss is what I call the loss of safety, And that's where we feel more vulnerable, and we start asking, well, what happens if I get sick again? Or what happens if I never really recover? What happens? I don't feel safe in my own skin. I'm afraid of falling. I don't really want to go outside anymore because I'm afraid of exposure to COVID. So that feeling of being fragile and not being resilient, begins to kind of close in. And that's the second elephant, is the loss of safety, and feelings that we're fragile, and feelings that we're not really very resilient, and that we might not be getting better, or we don't want to take any risks because we're afraid that this isn't going to get better, or we'll get sick again. And the third loss, I think we talked about, the third elephant, is the loss of identity. And we start to question who we are. Say, well, who am I, if I can't keep my job? Or who am I if I can't take my kid to school? Or who am I, if I can't stand up for half an hour and cook dinner? That the who am I's can go very deep, because we can lose our sense of being able to be useful. And very often when people get a diagnosis of, say, an illness like cancer, or, very serious, some other serious illness, and you're an adult, you very often feel like you're a failure of somehow. You're ashamed. People are ashamed, like they did something wrong. And only in the United States, apparently, do people feel ashamed of getting sick, or they feel that, it's a punishment by God that they did something wrong. Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, had done a study of several different countries, including European countries, and asked people about their attitudes about illness. And only in the United States do people feel that if you get sick and it's a serious illness, or you're sidelined, or you're benched, or you may never go back to the workplace, that there's a sense of failure to that. So we lay this heavy guilt trip on ourselves when we do get sick, and we can keep making ourselves feel very unfortunate indeed if the illness doesn't recover, and if we don't recover from the illness in a couple of months. And then we really start dealing with the third elephant, which is, well, who am I? Who am I if I'm still sick after 2 months, after 3 months, after a year? Who am I if I still, can't cook dinner, or I can't work? And those are, and what is my life worth, if I can't be productive and fulfilled and active in the way that I used to be? And that's really where we begin to explore the sacred illness piece. Because what can you do? It's not what the losses that you have, but what you can do is to deepen your relationship with your inner world. And you can learn how to explore different resources and come up with different strengths and abilities that you didn't know that you had. You can explore creativity. You can explore spirituality. You can connect with other people who are going through something similar, because these support groups online are phenomenal, and we can really help each other, and we can build a more empathic society, I think, because of our being able to connect, during the pandemic. I think it's really the best antidote, I think, for dealing with loss of identity, is to connect with others who are feeling something similar. So those are the cycles.
Yeah. Well, and I so appreciate you taking the time to dive in that and share that with us, because my goodness, it seems like it's something we all need right now. And, while we're so isolated, we're really starving to have a deep level of connection with one another. And, it has me kind of thinking, I know you also talk about like emotional first aid. What is that? And is that even possible right now?
Emotional first aid is also, as I spoke about it briefly before, I think it's essential that we are able to monitor and observe when we start to feel like we want to jump out of our own skin, or somebody slams a door or speaks in a loud voice, and you literally feel like you're going to jump out of your own skin. Or you're just feeling, very unsettled, or you get very impatient because there's somebody in front of you, in a supermarket line, or you're in traffic, and you suddenly find that you feel angry at situations where you didn't used to feel angry. Those are signs that you basically have too much stress, too many stress hormones building up in your body, in your system. So having these emotional first aid tools can help you to de-stress very quickly and really take the edge off in a matter of seconds. And as I said, we have a few of them. They are videos available at pulmonarywellness.org. If you go to the COVID page, I think those are the best ones that I have available right now. There are a couple of videos on my website, which is laurienadel.com. One of them is a CBS News story where I demonstrate butterfly hugs, which is the acupressure technique where you cross your arms over your heart and you tap very gently on your lungs, and that also very soothing within a matter of seconds. And so those are the main places that you can find videos of the emotional first aid tools. And I think everybody, they're very easy to access. They take a couple of seconds. They don't cost anything. And I think everybody should have one or two that you remember to go to when you're starting to get too stressed, and share them with your kids because they're very kid friendly.
Well, I just love that video. I think it's so empowering. And, and especially the way that you're looking at COVID and approaching it and being there for so many people. I mean, addressing COVID as a sacred illness and talking about it that way, I think also opens people up to the discussion of not only what's happening to ourselves during the time of COVID, but how we can help other people as well.
Right, exactly. So that's the key to the sacred illness, is that we come to new understanding about ourselves, and aligns us with it brings us knowledge about ourselves that we could not possibly achieve in any other way. And it aligns us with a life path that is ultimately of benefit to ourselves and those around us. And so, in a way, you could say that although the isolation is a stress amplifier, it's also a catalyst for people to really, because we do have this need, it's an instinctive need to connect with other people, that the isolation is a catalyst for us to become more supportive, more empathetic, more understanding of other people who are going through the same thing. Because basically, when you have a chronic illness, when you have a long illness, you really do start to question your identity, and you really are living kind of. Sometimes people describe it as feeling trapped in their own cells. That loss of control over your body, not being able to get out of bed, or not being able to take care of your own basic functions. It really is psychologically very isolating to be going through a serious illness. And most people are not trained. I mean, this is a very difficult conversation. I think I thank you, Marianne, for being willing to listen, but hardly anybody wants to listen to what it's like to be living or go through a serious illness. People don't want to know because it's scary. And of course it's scary, but we need to be able to talk about what we're going through when we are seriously sick, because otherwise we really are captured in this kind of, it's like the isolation chamber. And so it's very, very important that we be able to offer our own experience to help somebody else who may be going through the same thing or something similar. Because once you're very sick and you're bedridden or you're disabled, you become the forgotten in this culture. We don't think about people who are sick. And now we have millions. There are millions of people who are sick. And people need to be heard, and they need to be valued, whether or not they're healthy.
It seems in many ways that we're going through, this mass traumatic event. And, while everyone has their own milestones with what's happening with their own COVID journey, as, humanity itself, it seems like we're all going through this together.
We are all going through this together. This is something that is affecting all of humanity. The whole planet. We're really all in this together. If we read about an epidemic like the bubonic plague or something that went on for very, very many years, and it became a fact of life. And I recently read that the Shakespeare's masterpiece Romeo and Juliet is actually a pandemic love story that was written about the bubonic plague. And Mercurio, who's the messenger, was supposed to deliver Juliet's letter to Romeo so they could be together. But because Mercurio was quarantined because of the pandemic, and they didn't let him travel to where Romeo was, I think in Verona, so he had to quarantine in Venice for a few days. And by the time they let him deliver his message, Romeo believed that Juliet wasn't coming, and Romeo had committed suicide. And then, of course, Juliet dies tragically at the end as well. But that's a pandemic. That's one of the great love stories of all time. It was written because of with the bubonic plague as the kind of unifying theme, I guess, of how these life events that are greater than we are can affect us as individuals.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about Romeo and Juliet, never think about that going through that time in history when humanity is going through another plague of its own.
That's right. And we are. And we never hear about how is this affecting, children in Africa, or, how is this affecting, mothers in, different parts of China or Uzbekistan, or, in South America. They've had a very tough time. In Argentina, I think they're still pretty much in lockdown throughout most of Argentina, and Brazil has had a very, very, millions of people have been sick. And I think Brazil is the country after the United States that's had the most deaths from COVID. And so we really, we don't really take in the global picture of how this is ravaged, populations around the world. And I think it'll be a few years before we're even mentally able to comprehend how widespread this has been and how it's affected us as human beings all over the planet.
Yeah, there's so much to consider there, and just, how things are going to look going forward, when I don't think anyone really has the answers to that.
That's the thing that really, I think Saturday Night Live, Kate McKinnon had a great sketch, and she was kind of, making fun of that, with playing a doctor, and everything, every question that was asked, she goes, we don't know. And as Americans, we don't know as an answer. We believe that there has to be an answer. There has to be a logical, rational, understandable answer. And very often with these, bigger than life events, we can't possibly comprehend them and the global scale of these events, anyway, because there are forces greater than we are at work here, whether you think of them as forces of nature or forces of God or forces of the environment. But, we have these huge kind of sweeping waves of change and destruction and rebirth. And, it's really intensified. So we're living in a time of not knowing. And, when we look at not knowing the way a child approaches life. So every day the child wakes up and the child doesn't know, the child's just learning how to walk, and you go through life and everything is new, and you have to kind of, figure out how to put one foot down in front of the other. You can be upset about that, or you can approach it like a child and say, well, this is strange. This is new. I wonder what else I can be learning right now, that can help me to make life easier for myself and other people. So it's a strange opportunity to also reframe how we look at adversity. And I'm not saying that adversity isn't deeply troubling and painful and hurtful, but we can also glean something important from living or from the experience of living through adversity, especially with everybody else on the planet. I mean, we're not going through it alone.
I think strange opportunity says it all, right? I mean, that says it all. When you look at that, it's just like,
Yeah.
It really can be an opportunity. I have a friend who, she's learning Spanish during this time. She got laid off and she's learning Spanish. And, different people are doing different things, and not that everyone has the time to do that, but there is opportunity there.
There is opportunity. There's opportunity. I was thank God, for the internet. There's opportunity to learn new things, learn new languages, to travel to strange parts of the world. There are all these like homemade travelogues on YouTube. There are, new movies coming out every day. Excellent new movies. There's, and also I think just listening to each other in a more thoughtful way. We're something that we don't tend to do when we're busy and when we're roaming around, when we're working hard. We don't always stop and listen with care. And I think that, if anything, the pandemic has, again, given us that strange opportunity to really make eye contact and really make soul contact and to listen with care to what someone else is going through. I think it's a great gift, the gift of empathy.
Yeah.
The gift of empathy, one of the five gifts.
Yeah, what a great gift that is. Well, my goodness. I mean, Laurie, we could talk forever. I always just value the time we spend together. Where can our listeners connect with you? And why don't you share the website one more time where they can be part of that community?
Our COVID community website is pulmonarywellness.org. And I think there's probably a link to get to that website on my website, which is laurienadel.com. And you can contact me through the website, laurienadel.com. We're about to do a big redesign, but you will always be able to contact me even when we're under construction. So thank you. Thank you so much, Marianne. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your this is a difficult topic, and I really appreciate your courage and openness in wanting to let some of these thoughts and ideas go out to reach people, hopefully help them during this very difficult time.
Well, thank you, Laurie. I mean, I really appreciate you spending the time talking with us about this. I think it's something that we need to shed light on and just have everyone come to the table and have the discussion and be there to help one another in the best ways that we can. Well, Laurie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
And thank you for having me, Marianne. And thanks to each of you for listening. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Laurie. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about reframing COVID and support groups for Longhaulers. Again, if you'd like to connect with Laurie, you can at laurienadel.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.